Ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege for me to moderate this session with a very versatile person. Saurabh Mukherjea is an economist, a strategist, a super salesman, and an investor all rolled into one. Well, I'll come to his authorship later. So he's an all-rounder. He did his MSc from London School of Economics with business and started a work there in London in a company called Clear Capital. Luckily for us, he came back to India and joined Ambit Capital as the CEO. And there he made his mark in India. All his investments gave great return. And naturally, unlike a normal Bengali, he decided to venture out and become an entrepreneur. And he started this fantastic firm called Marcellus Investment. So he is all things rolled into one. He's a voracious reader. Every week, he comes out with 3 longs and 2 shorts. That means he's reading 3 books, and long books and 2 short books, and conversing them into a small thing for the readers. He has written some great books, Coffee Can Investing. I'm sure Saurabh will tell us more about the concept of this coffee can investing, Diamonds in the Dust, Gurus of Chaos, etc., etc. You can see the way they have been worded is itself fascinating. I have had the privilege of meeting Saurabh Babu I call him Saurabh Babu because being from Bengal, that comes naturally. And I have walked the talk in the sense that I have invested in his firm and naturally with very good returns. So today Saurabh Babu will try to speak on the subject on how the structural reforms which are taking place in India are very similar to what happened in USA few decades back, or nearly 50, 60 years back, and how the reforms and the infrastructure is going to make India also a land of opportunity. Over to Saurabh Babu, but let me warn you, after you have spoken, please give some time for us to ask questions and be prepared to get some from the floor on capital market.
Will do. So I'll speak from over there.
Sure.
So good afternoon, folks. It's an absolute privilege being here. It's an absolute privilege not just to be addressing IMA. From what I understand, there are many thousands of people watching online, to everybody online as well. Thank you for your time. But it's also a privilege to be in front of old friends, right? I've learned a lot over the years from C.K. Ranganathan ji. Rekha was a steady source of support and encouragement through COVID. And Jalan Saab, as he mentioned, I have the privilege of knowing him for a few years. There's a few more friends in the audience. It's a privilege to be amongst friends after 2 to 3 very difficult years. Now, the subject I've chosen is how this country has changed radically over the last 10, 15 years. And the reason I chose this subject is I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of misunderstanding not just about what's happening in the country. There's also widespread misunderstanding about what constitutes economic development. A lot of people in our country say visit cities like Dubai and Singapore and come back thinking that's development, right? Development is different. Development works in a specific way. If you and I understand development, we can make a lot of money from it. If we misunderstand development, we will make a khichdi out of this whole politics and economics interplay, which is the norm in our country, right? To mix politics and economics. And the context I will take is a recent development which I saw firsthand. So for many years, as Jalan Saab is mentioning, for many years we've been writing about India, how the country is changing, how we can make money. We write books, we write newsletters, and thankfully some people read them. So back in the month of April, the global management team of The Economist flew down to Mumbai. The main editor, the business editor, the finance editor, the Asia editor, they flew down and we spent a lot of time with them, helping them understand our point of view on the changes in our country. Following that meeting, meeting, this cover story is what emerged. 13th May 2022, this cover story emerged in The Economist. If you haven't read it, I would strongly recommend reading it. It's a fabulous 6-pager on the changes in our country. Remember, this is not some captured media constituency. This is a well-respected global publication. And their main point was, sounds uncontroversial now, the main point was this year, 2022, we will be by far the world's fastest growing large economy, right? Not only did they say this year will be the world's fastest growing large economy, for several years to come, the Economist contended, for several years to come, India will be the world's fastest growing large economy. Why did they say it? Right, I'll get into why they said it. There's 3 broad reasons. And how can you make money from it, right? After all, you're spending precious time on a weekday to understand how to make more money in this vast economy. So we'll break that into 2 parts. I'll take around 10 minutes each. Why is the Economist contending that for several years to come, this will be the world's fastest growing large economy? And how can you profit from it, make money from it? Broadly speaking, there are 3 sets of changes we will discuss. The first is a massive infrastructure build out over the last 10 years, right? There aren't too many precedents anywhere in the world for what's transpired in India over the last decade. Doubling of road network, tripling of airline networks, trebling of bank accounts, 50-fold rise in broadband connectivity, right? We'll discuss the infrastructure rolled out. It's only apt that I think, from what I understand, the roads minister has already addressed this distinguished audience. But we'll discuss the infrastructure connectivity and what does it imply for your businesses, right? Second piece is a transformation in the financial system, right? A change in the way capitalism works in our country, and a sea change in the banking system with massive ramifications for the economy. You're already seeing the changes. You'll see much more in the next 2 to 3 years. And the third aspect that we will go into is how savings from you and me are getting financialized on the back of a complete transformation in direct and indirect tax reform, right? I studied economics at the LSE. I've looked at tax systems in various countries. I have never seen a country which in the space of 10 years reforms direct taxes and indirect taxes, right? And finally, we will discuss how these changes click together, right? Infrastructure, tax system, banking system, how is it clicking together? How are the smartest business people in India making billions of dollars out of these changes, and so doing, transforming the face of the country? I caveat everything by saying the way free market economics works is a few large businesses pull away the vast majority of the upside, lakhs of small businesses get wiped out. Right, I'll share some data with you, staggering data at the rate at which small businesses are getting wiped out. A few large businesses pull away the upside. This is how Japan developed. This is how America developed. This is how Korea developed. And this is how India is developing. If you and I understand the change, the chances are greater we will be amongst those few winners. If we misunderstand the change, the chances are greater that we'll be amongst those lakhs of businesses which are being snuffed out in this vast economy. The mental model, as Jalan Sahib has already referenced, if you want to simplify it, take one mental model away. America 1880 to 1930. In 1880, America was a village economy, right? They had local blacksmiths, local greengrocer, local vegetable merchants, and so on. 1880, roughly, the railroad network got done. 1900, telegraph came along. 1910, the world's first mass-produced car, Model T Ford came along, and 1930, 1940 tak, their road network was done. In 50 years, you joined the world's largest economy. And as you joined America, right, national brands started emerging. Every single brand that you associate America with, excluding the tech brands, every single brand you associate America with was born in those 50, 60 years. Right? So to take an example, let's take Heinz. It's not as if Americans were not having ketchup in 1870. They were bilkul having ketchup. But the ketchup manufacturer was like the achar manufacturer in India today, local player. Right? The ketchup manufacturer was a local player. Heinz was the most efficient of the ketchup manufacturers. And when the country got joined up, Heinz gobbled up the rest of the tomato ketchup industry. That's why today we know of Heinz. And in a way, my wife and I migrated to this country 14 years ago to benefit from the Heinzification of the country. In every industry, one or two companies are going to rise. They're going to gobble up the entire industry profits. And you and I can enrich ourselves if we identify relatively early who will become Heinz in that industry and ride that chain of 10, 20, 30 year prosperity, right? That's the mental model. Let's get into the details, right? So first change, infrastructure. The easy aspects are well known. It's well known that physical infrastructure has burgeoned. A decade back, we didn't have industrial corridors worth talking about. We now have several thousand crores worth of it. The road network has doubled. And think about it, right? If you double the road network, journey times half, right? So Hosur to Vizag, you load a truck in Hosur at 5 a.m. By 10 a.m., it will be loaded on a ship. I remember as a child going from Kolkata to Jamshedpur, it was an overnight train journey. Now, if you tell my kids that it will be overnight train journey Kolkata to Jamshedpur, they'll think you're mad, right? Kolkata to Jamshedpur is now a 3.5 hour car ride, right? Even when I moved to India in 2008, Bombay to Kolhapur was a solid 12-hour, 13-hour slog. Now I leave my house in Bombay at 6 a.m. By noon, I am at the Maharashtra-Karnataka border, right? Journey times half. When you double the road networks, that means working capital cycle reduces, right? But let's go into the non-physical aspects of this. The non-physical are even more striking, right? Jan Dhan resulted in 440 million bank accounts, as everybody now knows. The number of bank accounts has tripled in the last 10 years. But the most dramatic development was UPI. So 12 years ago, Nandan Nilekani laid the foundations of Aadhaar. On Aadhaar, UPI was established in 2016. UPI today is the world's largest real-time payments network by a country mile. It transacts $1.2 trillion of financial transaction volume. 40% of Indian GDP goes through UPI, right? Now, the implications of this are actually mind-blowing. I'll illustrate with an example. There's a chai wala, coffee wala outside our office in Bombay. He's a local chai wala. He's a migrant from Telangana to Mumbai. He set up stall 14 months ago. Today, he sells 2,500 cups of chai coffee a day. He does not take cash. He does not take cash because he says time nahi hai to take Saurabh ka 50 rupees, give him back 30 rupees, take the chiller, go to HDFC Bank. Time nahi hai. If you don't have the money, he says, have it on me. Aap bhi kya yaad rakhoge? Mujh pe pee lo chai coffee. The only way to pay him is QR code. He has his various Google Pay and Paytm, Shaytm. You pay him to QR code, 25 rupees ka chai coffee, which old timers in Bombay are aghast at. They say, 2 rupees mein peete the, 25 rupees hai. Interestingly, down the road, Starbucks hai, 250 rupees chai coffee. There they willing to take cash. But the SME vendor has realized that cash lene mein is a futile activity. The gentleman who delivers newspapers to me, he gives me the bill like this. He doesn't even look at me. He says, Google Pay kar dena, and he walks away. Right? 15% of India's small businesses are now paid almost entirely in digital. Imagine the consequences. वो check का जमाना गया. 99% of transactions in India are now cleared digitally, a higher proportion in the Western world. If you do not have to wait for payment as a small business, you don't have to wait for payment, turant payment, no, real time. You don't have to wait for payment as a small business, your working capital cycle reduces further. Right? In any business, if you collect quicker, you have more cash in your hand. Furthermore, if you're digitizing the payment, my coffee wala, if his income is digitized, it's hard to go black. So from the most modest strata of Indian society, SME strata is going digital, and that necessarily means that the supply into new entrants into the black economy gets cut off there, right? This has more implications, as I'll discuss in a minute. Now we'll discuss the black economy, right? So the GST changes everybody's aware of. I'm not going to get into bore you with GST. What I'm going to point out is the way network effects play out. The reason GST collections are rising year upon year is because of the network effects. Remember, if Marcellus is to claim input tax credit, I have to give the names of my suppliers. Right? Otherwise, I can't claim input tax credit, right? For my suppliers to claim input tax credit, they have to give up the names of their suppliers, right? So each year, this network gets wider and wider. It gets harder and harder and harder to evade GST. If somebody really wanted to do it, you could do it. But amongst indirect tax systems, this is one of the most cleverly constructed ones anywhere else in the world. Again, I can tell you with good authority, I've seen how indirect tax systems work. This is very cleverly constructed. It'll get harder and harder to evade this. But let's look at an even more fascinating change. Real-time case study in front of you and me about the crunching of the black economy. September 2019, the FM cut the tax rate, right? 35 se 25 kar diya corporate tax rate. September 2019, FM cut 35 se 25. Corporate tax collections to GDP are at an all-time high now. What does that mean? If you cut the rate and you collect more money, that means more people are being brought into the ambit of the tax envelope, right? Total taxes to GDP, central government taxes to GDP, roughly at 12%. That's the highest it's ever been. Our reckoning is it'll have to go to 15. Without it going to 15, we'll have some serious challenges. Now, obviously, as total tax to GDP goes to 15, the SME community will again have to pay more taxes. As the SME community pays more, naturally you can imagine, right, more SMEs will shut down and market share migrates from black to white. So I'm sorry, the print is a little small. Bilkul niche, right at the bottom of the slide, I've given you some stats for the pipe sector, the CPVC pipe sector, plastic pipe ka sector. 10 years ago, it was 50-50 black-white. 10 years ago, plastic pipes was 50-50 black-white. Now only 1/3 is black. Now only 1/3 is black. I reckon another decade hence, barely 15% will be black. And similar changes have fructified in paint, in adhesives, in undergarments, in jewelry, so on and so forth, right? I went to school in this very city, not very far away from where we are speaking. We had 50 people in our class. Out of the 50, 20 businesses are shut down. Right? Their profit margin was tax evasion. Naturally, those businesses are shutting down. The owners are selling the dukan in Karol Bagh, pulling out the working capital. And as Jalan Saab said, they're giving all of that money to Marcellus to manage because they're better off Marcellus growing their wealth rather than a shop in Karol Bagh trying to grow their wealth, right? So this is the second layer of change, right? Massive ramifications. As per the Ministry of Corporate Affairs data, every year, 7.5 lakh companies are shutting down. They are and this is specific. You can see that this data kicks in after GST. After GST, every year, 7.5 lakh businesses shutting down. They are the casualties of the formalization of the economy. ठीक है? आगे बढ़ते हैं. Third change. A lot of people who change our country do so chupchap. Sorry. The direct tax, sir, we discussed the corporate tax rate, no? Sorry. Income tax regime, sir. Right, so let's get into the banking system. Right, now I can see several people here who are far more seasoned in the ways and means of how the banking system worked than I am. Right, I migrated here in 2008. For the first 4 years, what I saw was is not worth describing, especially in a distinguished forum like this. What happened in 2014, we all know. But what's more remarkable is what happened in June 2015. June 2015, the then RBI governor, Raghuram Rajanji, called the CMDs. CMDs stands for Chairman and Managing Director. This was once upon a time a person who could do everything in one go. He called them to a room in Mint Road, RBI, and he said, you have 3 months to clean up your numbers. Effectively, Rajanji said, you have 3 months to publish real NPA figures. Officially, this was called the Asset Quality Review. Unofficially, we realized real time, this is a watershed in Indian banking as the old regime of faking the numbers faded. Now, as you can imagine, those bankers must have dialed lots of phone numbers in Delhi saying, save us, but Delhi did not save them. Instead, what did Delhi expedite? Delhi expedited in 2016 the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, which said that if you've been deemed to be an NPA, right, your company's been deemed to be an NPA, you get 180 days to clean up your act. And on the 181st day, you will be auctioned out and you will be on the street as a promoter. And thus, many of us, including myself, saw something we never thought we would see in our lifetime. We saw incredibly powerful people who had messed around with the banking system lose control of their assets. And it was honestly astonishing to watch this happen. Through 2018-19, I had actually bet with my friends that it's not going to happen, but it happened, and I think I'm so thankful it's happened. Why am I thankful? The top chart. What does the top chart show you? Stressed assets in the banking system are at a decadal low. Right? The banking system's arteries have been unclogged. What is the result of that? The result of that is anybody in this room can now go and get a home loan at 7%. Right? That is mind-blowing. The 10-year Government of India bond yield is 7.3. The home loan rate is 7%. At zero spread to the 10-year Government of India bond yield, you can get a home loan. In USA, the 10-year Government of India, the US 10-year bond yield is 3.5. The US home loan rate is 6. In US, the banks are saying, pay me a 250 bips premium. इंडिया में बैंक्स आर सेइंग सेम रेट पे आपको पैसा मिलेगा. गो एंड टॉक टू एनी बैंक मैनेजर, यू विल सी होम लोन डिमांड is at an all-time highs. Car loans 8.5, washing machine loans, say for my maid, at 9.5. If you unblock the heart of the economy, the heart of the economy is the banking system. If you unblock it, naturally you fuel productive economic activity. The second thing, the lower table, is capital in the banking system. Capital is the bank's own capital divided by the loan book. That's the capital ratio, is at an all-time high, 17%. That's the highest ratio amongst any large economy in the world. Stressed assets down, capital up, you have a productive banking system. That's a massive asset. That's the capital reallocation engine in the country, and that's functioning, right? I'm going to skip a few things just to sort of pull this aspect together, right? These changes interplay. The more you squeeze the black economy through tax reforms, the more the more people financialize their savings, right? If your company has to go white, you as a promoter might as well invest in the financial system. You've got many different data points on financialization. I've cited the obvious one. A decade ago, India had 19 million brokerage accounts. Today, India has 100 million brokerage accounts, right? All of you put together, people like you and me, we are saving $80 billion a year, right? All of us put together, last 5 years, we're saving $80 billion a year. Over a 10-year period, we are saving $1 trillion. That pushes down the cost of capital. Right? If you push down the cost of capital, you help the organized player vis-a-vis the unorganized. And in the bottom chart, bilkul niche, the bottom chart, what we're trying to show you is the share of corporate profits taken by the top 20 companies has gone from being 30% 10 years ago to 70%. 20 giant companies today take home 70% of corporate India's profits. This is the Heinzification of India. This is going to carry on for 20, 30 more years. In every sector, one or two players will take the entire market away. Your and my job is to identify them, right? Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to shift to how you can make money from this, right? So all that we do, all that I think anybody has to do is just do 3 things right. First step, right? Either use a chartered accountant or learn the basics of forensic accounting yourself and identify promoters, identify companies whose books are for real, right? This is straightforward enough to do in our book, Diamonds in the Dust, right? In Diamonds in the Dust, we've given you a range of simple techniques that you and I can use to identify companies whose books are for real, and you weed out companies who are doing naughty things with their accounts, right? Just to sort of take an example, if you look at the table on the top left, one simple metric which has never let us down is, if you find a listed entity whose auditor's fees grow faster than the company's revenues, if you find a listed entity whose audit fees grow faster than the company revenues over 5-6 years, be very suspicious, right? It's a powerful red flag. This has served us in great stead in unearthing many naughty companies over the years. Some of those people today are behind bars in Delhi itself, actually, right? So first step, identify naughty promoters, screen them out. That's 40% of the stock market gone. From BSE 500, it becomes 300. The second step is, amongst the promoters who are clean, what you and I are looking for is smart capital allocators, people with business intelligence. Now, until I became a promoter, I didn't realize it. Now that I've become a promoter, I know. For every promoter you meet, his IQ is written on his forehead, right? The promoter's IQ is written on his forehead. It's just called return on capital employed, right? It's not sort of really on the forehead. You open the promoter's accounts, his return on capital is the promoter's IQ. Right? So what you and I are looking for is promoters who can generate a return on capital of at least 15%. Why 15%? If you want to earn 15% from investing, promoters has to deliver 15% return on capital. No, otherwise you can't earn that money. It's not going to come from the Almighty in the sky. So you and I need companies who consistently do return on capital of at least 15%. Half the companies in India drop out at this stage. Okay? So we were at 300, we're now at basically 50 companies. 50 companies with real accounts and with promoters who can generate an ROC of at least 15% on a consistent basis, right? Out of those 50, what we have done, and you can do this, actually I'll give you a very straightforward way to do this. Out of those 50, we have chosen around 15 to 20 on one metric, which is what you and I need are companies who charge 20, 30, 40% premiums every day. They charge you and me only. When we go to the market, you're looking for companies that charge us 20, 30, 40% extra for the product. We happily pay that premium, And when somebody comes and tells us, yes, sasta maal le lo, we say, bhago yahan se, we don't want sasta maal, we only want the premium maal. We call these people the consistent compounders. Clean promoters, intelligent capital allocators, but most importantly, dominant franchises which charge you and me hefty premia, which we happily pay and drive that company's prosperity. When somebody comes and says, take a cheaper product, we say, no, sorry, I don't want it, right? In the global context, I can see the phones on many of your tables. In the global context, many of you are already using such a product. It's called the iPhone. In the Indian context, I think you would have heard of a company called Titan. It's India's largest jeweler, right? Tanishq is India's largest jeweler. The secret of Tanishq's success, I'll give you today. It's very simple, but it's not easy to do. The secret of their success is they're making charges are 30% higher than any other jeweler, right? Not just today, it's been for 20 years. If it's 30% higher making charges, the return on capital is significantly higher, 35 typically, ROCE. For any company, the surplus the dhanda throws off, the surplus the company throws off is ROC minus cost of capital. Right? Assume cost of capital conservatively is 15. It's actually low, but simple rakhte hain. 35 minus 15 is 20%. Titan generates a surplus equal to 20% of capital employed. What do they do with it? They reinvest the vast majority back in the business, right? More Titan shops, more offerings, sarees, etc. Over the last 20 years, in Titan's case, capital employed has grown at roughly 20%. Free cash flows, the cash thrown out by the business has grown at 30%. Share price compounding has been 35%, which means in the last 20 years, in front of you and me, Titan has created 340x of wealth, 340x compounding. Today, it's a $45 billion company. At the turn of the century, it wasn't even $1 billion, right? Now, why is it that no other jeweler can do what Titan does? Why can't other jewelers charge 30% premium? And secondly, why can't any jeweler go to the ladies in this audience and say, ma'am, we've got a good product at a knockdown price, please patronize us. So neither have you seen the disruptor nor the imitator, right? And there's a reason for it. If you want to understand the reason, read Unusual Billionaires. We've given away the biggest secrets of India's monopolies in Unusual Billionaires so that everybody in the country, not just the elite, but millions of Indians will never be able to afford our services, can understand how great monopolies are built and how colossal wealth is created in this great country. Thank you very much. Thank you, Aima, for giving me this opportunity. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sirs, for your valuable inputs and views. May I request Mr. S.K. Swami, past President IMA, to present mementos to the speakers, please.